what's going on in the scaling retail space, you'll know that there's been so much happening in terms of courses, in terms of press, other really cool things we've got going on in terms of offerings and services and really helping our brands launch and get off the ground. But today is all about Fashion Profit Plan, and I've been working really hard on developing this course, and it's not the first time I've been teaching it. Fashion Profit Plan started a few years ago, and the title was actually called Launch My Brand. And I quickly realized that from a branding perspective, Launch My Brand didn't really get me very far. But I was so excited about all of the brands who jumped on board, people who gave it a shot, who tried the material. And it's really been totally revised and changed since the first time that I ended up doing the class. So thanks for joining me, guys, on this Q&A session. Many of you have sent in questions over email, so thanks for doing that. I'll be going over a lot of the questions, kind of talking about the class. For those of you guys who are really interested in kind of building your fashion businesses, I think one of the biggest challenges these days is really understanding what tools are available to you, right? It almost seems like the fun part is really in creating a lot of the content and producing and coming up with the visual storyboards and all of that, and rightly so, right? I mean, it's so awesome and exciting to be able to do that. But when it comes to actually executing that, there are really a couple different ways you can do that, right? And so the first way that I like to talk about brands is really going into the idea of what you are producing and creating with the end consumer in mind, right? That's really my favorite way of doing things, right? Already having an idea of what it is that you want to get off the ground. The other way of launching a business is coming at it really from the perspective of creative ambition. And so when I say creative ambition, that's really, you start off with a vision and the idea for the product, you produce your samples, and then you kind of come back at it and you start to think about what is it that you're actually going to be selling it to in terms of marketing, making sure your price point and your branding and all of that kind of supports that. So what I'm going to go over today, a couple questions that I got in through email about the course, what it's about. And for those of you guys who are listening, we're doing this live. We're also shooting it, so hopefully it'll get to syndicate on a couple other platforms. But the goal here is really to be not only answer questions, but give a little bit more history in terms of the philosophy and in terms of where all this information comes from. So let me pull up these questions and we'll get started. Okay, some of these are kind of technical, but they're good. It's nice to get some technical questions. Okay, so the first one is, if I'm not a long-time established brand, but I'm also not a startup, could I benefit from taking this course? If so, how? So if you're not an established brand, then yes, this course is certainly for you. If you're not a startup, so I would start to qualify what exactly a startup is. There are so many different ways of being a startup, and in fact, some startups kind of last 5-7 years. You can still be considered a startup, right? So the notion of what a startup is very different. For the purposes of this class, I'd say the main things you really want to think about is, do you have an understanding of cash flow planning? Are you able to plan out your cash incoming, outgoing? If you have an accountant, awesome. Are you working with your accountant to really understand what the nature of cash flow is for your business? Unless you have a financial advisor who works with you, which would be amazing, right? Understanding your cash flow for yourself is really going to be super critical. So the cash flow sections that we cover are not super advanced. So if you are really advanced in terms of where you are with your business, you're certainly going to find it to be a little bit more mundane. But if you're someone in the first few years of their business who's starting to figure out, Microsoft Excel, starting to budget things like, what are my, monthly expenditures going to be on things like marketing? What are my monthly expenditures going to be on my operating costs? How do I actually start to think about collection building over time? So not only looking at when sales are coming in, because of course, as we know in wholesale, it's not just simply about, you make the sale and you get the money, right? It's usually, let's say net 30, net 45 sometimes after you actually deliver the goods. So starting to take a look at your business from a long-term perspective with cash flow is great. So that module I'd say it's for anyone who's maybe a little bit scared of understanding their finances. Now, I'm not going to sit here and go through all 9 of them because I'm sure I could be here for forever. But that one is certainly important to understand. So if you have a really strong working knowledge of your cash flow and you're really comfortable and confident on Excel, then I think you'll find that this particular module on cash flow and the rest of them are probably going to be a little too entry level for you, right? Because you probably already understand things like assortment planning or understanding your pricing matrix and all of that. Now, if you're within the first, I would say, 2 years of your business or 3 years of your business, then the business fundamentals class is going to be great for you, especially if the first season that you launched, you're still trying to understand and pivot, right? And I would certainly say that after about 18 months of successfully, going after the pavement and, pitching wholesalers with an aggressive digital marketing strategy, et cetera, after those 18 months, you probably have a good idea of whether or not you need to pivot or whether or not you need to persevere, right? So I think that is really one of the most important things to understand is where are you in your business flow? And, do you have enough traction running? Are you expanding sales? Or are you just trying to get your sales off the ground and understand what are the channels that are available to you, right? If you're trying to expand and you want to do deep dives into wholesale or you're expanding in terms of growth in your digital marketing and you already have budgets aside for $5,000, $10,000 a month, then this class and business fundamentals is going to be too easy. Right? This course is really designed for people who are strong on the creative side, really understand what their passion and their vision is, or maybe even just starting in terms of product development, but want to be able to couch their business in terms of a strong foundation, right? And so the different areas that we touch on are really the merchandising, so that's price point, understanding assortment planning, all of that is really important. So if you're launching a brand and you're saying, okay, well, I have these 2 items. Well, then you're probably going to find out in the course of this class that unless you're an item-driven brand and you're only going to produce one thing in multiple colors, you probably need to revisit the game and start to think about assortment planning, a little bit more cohesively, right? So there's merchandising. There's also CEO management strategies, which I have found to be so useful. So I go over things like tools and applications and things like that that are really useful for your business. So if you are not just a startup, so if you want to call yourself a startup, but you've been around for 3 years, but these areas are still a little vague, or you're unsure about how to do a proper wholesale strategy, or how to really be building out your e-commerce, then yes, this is going to be great for you. Okay, how soon can I start to put what I learn into action? You can start to put stuff into action right away. Actually, all the modules are going to be available, though I suggest doing them over the course of 9 weeks. They'll all be available to you from day one. So depending on how quickly you like to binge, on a personal level, I've been known to binge through TV shows over a weekend. But if you're really into binging stuff, then you're going to get through everything in the weekend. And chances are you'll be able to hit the ground running Monday morning. With a lot of updates and changes. So imagine your website today and what you have going on your business today and getting a crash course in terms of understanding your customers, understanding your pricing, understanding your e-commerce. Are you writing the right information on these different product pages? How are you actually selling your stuff? Rethinking the way you look at digital marketing, rethinking how you look at print and experiential and, direct marketing strategies. So yes, you could take this class over the weekend, plow through all the material, and then end up, Monday morning really able to apply stuff right away. I'd say for most people, you're probably going to want to take it maybe 1 a week, and then start to apply. For all of the classes, we have course material, so going over different principles, going over different kinds of strategies, and then there's a resource section, and next to the resource section, we also have templates and things like that, right? So what's really important is to kind of understand that the templates and all of those things you can start to use immediately, right? But you may want to listen to the course once or twice, and you also may want to take a look at resources just to kind of, further impact what you're doing with your business. So the question was, how soon can I start to put what I learned into action? And the answer is right away. Okay. If I don't sign up for the 9-week course, can I sign up for more than one module instead. Okay, so if I know it's something I would course, so yes, you can absolutely take the classes individual. If you take them individual, you'll basically end up learning all different kinds of basics, right? So you can take cash flow individually, you can take pricing individually, you can take digital marketing individually, but really the value is in taking it all at once, right? Because then you have to save a bunch of money. And in terms of also taking it all at once, you also get to take advantage of private one-on-one sessions with me and then also group coaching, right? So that is like super valuable. So the course is $997. And as far as the other things that you get are not just the course material, so that's myself talking, but you also get access to private sessions with me. So that's three one-on-one sessions, and those are to be taken after you complete the class. So that basically means you've gone through all the materials, you've been attending some group coaching stuff. Now you're actually in the implementation phase of your business, and you're having direct and actionable things that you need assistance with, right? So that's really where I think not only having access to material is great, but then also kind of being able to chime in with someone one-on-one and be able to get that feedback. What I've actually found to be the most challenging, I think, with online classes, and I've taken a lot of that, different kinds of classes, right, for my business, and what I've even found has been so challenging is when you take an online class, but there's no environment to actually learn the information and have that kind of interaction, and get that guidance, whether that's through group work or that's through individual, it can be really daunting, right? It can be really intimidating to say, well, I spent all this money on this class, but like, how the hell do I actually get my questions answered, right? So I'm really excited about being able to offer that. Okay, next question here. We are two co-founders. Which one of us would you recommend attends? One of us focuses on marketing and the other is on design. Okay, so that is a really good question. I would say in terms of a co-founder or two people taking it, as much as, I would say, well, each of you guys should take it, I think you guys could probably split it up, right? So if you guys get access to the course, of course, the access is really ideally intended for you as the founder of your business, but if there are two of you, if there are people who are in marketing who are in your company, certainly, take advantage of the fact that you're covering so many different areas of your business, right? And if you're covering so many different areas, you're certainly going to want the people who are responsible for those areas to be able to absorb that information, right? And to be able to learn from that. So for things like, pricing strategy, certainly you want your designer and, the business person to understand that, because as a designer, how you design should not only be based on aesthetic and branding, but really ultimately the price points you want to be competing with, right? That kind of tells you a little bit more about your customer, right? And so that I think is extremely important. So I would say, one username and password is good for you. It's good for a partner in terms of a business partner. And I'd say that's about it. As far as like having an intern or someone else chime in, you're probably not going to want to have them chime in too much as far as your operations and et cetera. And keep in mind, one of the modules is called CEO Mindset, right? So which one of you guys is the CEO? But if you are running your business on your own, then I'd say yes, the entire class is perfect for you. Okay, here is another question. What will the one-on-one strategy calls cover? So that's really good. So they actually can cover just about anything you want them to. I mean, the course itself hits on so many different fundamental parts of your business, which is why I changed the name of my class from Launch My Brand to, fundamentals, right? I was like, all right, this makes more sense. Business fundamentals, right? So as far as the one-on-one strategy, you can really take that and apply that to various different areas of your business. Personally, I would say the one-on-one strategy that I have found to be best with people who've done this, oh, excuse me, itchy nose. Ooh. The ones who I have found to really take the most advantage of this are the ones who are actually applying it to real life situations. So if, for example, you have, you basically have a product that you're launching and you're wondering about price point and branding, etc., then you're certainly going to want to make sure that with price point and branding, you might want to have me take a look at that and take a look at your website and how all of that is lining up. Ooh, great question. What is my career history prior to this venture? Great question. Okay, so my career history is really cool. So I grew up in San Francisco, and in San Francisco, this is a long time ago, I was actually one of the very first people, and I can say this now. I used to laugh about it, but now I think it's kind of cool. So the very first people who tried to bring Fashion Week to San Francisco, and that was certainly an aesthetic bust. But anyway, my career in fashion started when I was about 18 years old, in terms of trying to get in on the grassroots of production, etc. Anyway, since then I went on to work in PR. I've lived in New York for the past 12 years. Sorry, I live in LA now, but I was in New York for the past 12 years. And my career history is pretty interesting. So I used to be in the buying offices at Macy's, which was amazing, in the activewear division. From Macy's, I went on to Barney's New York, one of the first few people at Barney's in the e-commerce division. I just gave this example a little while ago. I was on a course with Fashion Business Incorporated, and while I was at Barney's, I was at the table with the heads of Balenciaga, talking to the heads of Prada, and at the time, it was so funny because I was actually explaining to them, why they needed to be sold online, right? So imagine that. Imagine back in 2007, talking to these big brands and saying, hey guys, you really need to be thinking about selling online. In any case, I was at Barney's for a few years, and it was really while I was at Barney's and I was getting pitched and I was starting to see a lot of young designers send me their line sheets, want to get feedback, that I really started to realize what big holes in terms of business understanding a lot of small brands had. They had really cool product, really cool ideas, but in terms of execution beyond product development, it didn't really follow through, right? Things like what's your distribution strategy, or understanding the perceived value, or kind of the social footprints, and all of those types of things were not really well understood. Marketing developments, a lot of these brands would really solely focus on product. And while it's always great to have a cool product, it doesn't always get you that far unless you have a strategy to back it up, right? So anyway, back in 2008, I actually started consulting. From Barney's, I went on to Gucci. I ran a $50 million business at Gucci. I turned it into $100 million in about 2 years. That was very exciting. So that was also really fun, but certainly took a lot of time out of my life. I want to say about 12-hour days. And working with Italy was a wonderful, wonderful experience, but also really crazy and intense. From there, I went on to be the director of merchandising at Aha Life, where I was with them through seeing a Series C round of funding. And that was for about $20 million. And so being kind of on the inside of that startup, it was really amazing in terms of working really closely with the marketing and having hands-on overseeing marketing, also taking a look at the creative, making sure creative kind of works in tandem with merchandising, etc. So anyway, that's kind of my corporate career. Really interesting, really diverse. I feel so fortunate, I guess, you guys, to have been able to be inside the buying offices for so many different kinds of businesses, and being able to see them scale and grow and be responsible for such development, which also puts you in a really interesting and amazing position in terms of seeing how all these different departments look. Seeing the P&L statement of a major business gives you a lot of insight in terms of what's actually going to be working for a smaller business or not, right? How should those spreads be? So cool, and I'm sure something you guys haven't realized, but working in the fashion industry or running a fashion business is really a very low profit margin type of strategy, right? And the reason why I say that is bigger companies, at the end of the day, their operating costs, at the end, they're looking at maybe 7 to 10%, profit margins, right? I'm not talking about product, but the profit, right? So you have to start thinking about your business in terms of scale, right? If you're not going to make it on the percentage points at the end of the day, you've really got to be thinking about how your business is scaling and growing over time. And that has to be done with volume, right? So you've got to be thinking about your business in terms of strategy, scale, and volume. In any case, scaling retail, I incorporated and launched that in 2008. And so since then, I've had the pleasure of working with so many amazing and different kinds of companies. I would say my favorites, in terms of brands I work with, really have to do with the ones who put a lot of heart and soul into what they're creating. There are really two different kinds of people who launch companies. There are people who are coming out of this from it's a vanity project, and they're like, well, I have all this money, I'm just going to invest it, and have someone do all the work, etc. And while those can be very lucrative clients, my favorite ones are really the ones who have vision and heart, and are the ones who are really trying to grow and develop something, which is why for this course that I'm launching, being able to have me have that kind of interaction with you is really valuable, right? Because how else are you going to know why my clients call me a hired pain in the butt unless you have a taste of an experience of that for yourself, right? Anyway, since then, I've had the great pleasure of being interim CEOs of company. I've been able to, I launched a company called Verdad, was brought on board to be their interim CEO when they launched last year, which was really exciting. And since then, right now on my client list, I'm working with the amazing, Sugar High Lovestone. If you guys are, poking around after this, check them out. They're really cool. Road Resort, also amazing brand. Armature, Elzia. I'm working with some great guys, right? And they're all seeing a lot of success and growing, right? So in terms of 3xing their sales, etc. So what I did with this class is I basically put together a lot of best practices and a lot of things that are working for my clients. A lot of things that they've been thinking about, that they've been utilizing, and that they've been seeing results with. So when you see things like, oh, is it really possible to, 3x your results in terms of, website captivity, in terms of being able to have the right pitching, being able to increase your open rates in terms of having, buyers open your emails, etc. Those are all the different kinds of things that I end up covering in the fundamentals course, So that to me is the most exciting, because it's all the best practices kind of rolled into one, right? Which I love. Okay, so let me go ahead and answer a couple more questions. Okay, so this is a great question that I think is really fun and a little bit difficult to answer. So it's good. I like being put in the hot seat. Okay, so the example that someone gave me has to do with their own particular product line, and I think it's great because you guys get an idea of how troubleshooting and how all of that happens. But okay, would someone pay $85 for a polo shirt from a starting up luxury brand when they could buy a polo shirt from Uniqlo? So what I think is really interesting about this question and how you can start to think about pricing. So pricing is a whole class that I go over, and the pricing course is, it's a real deep dive in terms of, what makes pricing so important to think about. And at the end of the day, pricing is really going to be so valuable for you when you think about it in terms of branding, And so I'd say one of the biggest, things that kind of come out of the fundamental course is not just obviously business acumen, but understanding the importance of proper and effective branding in your business, right? So if you're not actually thinking about your business in terms of its perceived value, then as you guys approach, even handling things like being a CEO and how you conduct yourself over email, to things like, your pricing strategy, or even how you write your product copy, or how you're pitching your wholesalers, or even things like merchandising, if you don't think about your branding and your brand perception, then you actually end up losing quite a bit here. And what do I mean by that? I mean, your branding really dictates so much of what someone is willing to do or not do with your brand. Now, unfortunately, branding does have an impact on cash flow, right? And you may be wondering, how does that work correlatively? But when it comes to understanding cash flow, the most important thing to get is that from a cash flow perspective, if you invest money in your branding, you have a much longer term payoff. But investing money in branding is one of the areas that a lot of young brands are really hesitant to invest in. And so during the Fashion Profit Plan course, the first module is all about cash flow. And in cash flow, we kind of start to talk about and think about how much things are really going to cost in order to pull off a business that looks funded, right? It's really important. It's a lot of, nuances and a lot of different things in terms of understanding, how much you should be investing in your website, how much you should be investing in your logo development. And yes, there are a lot of different ways in which you can invest your money on things like 99 Designs. You can invest your money on things like, I'm trying to think of what other good ones on Fiverr. There are a lot of like little places where you can invest your money. Or you can also spend $15,000, hire someone who's really going to put together for you an ideal brand package. And an ideal brand package would be, your lookbook, not your lookbook, your short form, long form logo, and would also be things like, what your brand identity, your visual and verbal identity, all of that, and your website, right? So anyway, the first module kind of goes all along cash flow and understanding cash flow basics. But when it comes to how much someone's going to spend on something, modules 2 through 8, right, which are basically understanding your consumer, understanding your pricing, understanding digital marketing, direct marketing, right, going over your wholesale and going over your e-commerce, right? That's really the meat of it, right? A lot of that is going to be rooted in how you're positioning yourself based on your branding and based on the brand vision and the brand voice that you have. So I think that those are really fun, right? Modules 1 and 9 are kind of a little bit more, businessy in terms of heavy in the Microsoft Excel. Because as a CEO, you certainly want to have a good understanding on how to do cash flow, but you also want to understand, what are the mental gymnastics and mental exercises you can do to really help yourself, right? And I think that's also super important. But anyway, that was a really good question. And for those of you guys who are joining, thank you so much. We're going over questions all about the Fashion Business Fundamentals course. The course is launching in just a few weeks. It was great. I did a fantastic webinar called Rogue Retailing. Thank you to all of you guys who attended. We had nearly 300 people who came, which was really outstanding and really special. And really, I was so grateful to all of my content partners and to everyone who was so supportive of that. And the class is really a baby of mine. It's something that I've been perfecting and teaching over the last few years. And what's great about it is it constantly improves. So, the things that are working last year are certainly not the things that are working today. And it's important for you guys as brand owners to understand how markets are changing, right? So again, the group coaching stuff as well as the one-on-one sessions are so important in terms of, workshopping, and really figuring out how to internalize and how to get these things off the ground. Okay, so the other questions that I want to ask, and then I'll just answer. And then I'll do 2 more questions, and then, guys, I'm going to pop off. But just so you guys know, if you head on over to thefashionprofitplan.com, you will actually see kind of the course offering, everything that's in there. You can actually get a chance to still watch the Rogue Retailing webinar, which is amazing. I really go into business models there. So, like, the business model, I think, is so important for everyone to figure out, what is your business model? Are you producing a collection once a year? Are you producing a collection 4 times a year? What are your delivery dates, etc.? All really wonderful and exciting stuff, right? So the webinar is totally free, so definitely check it out. And if you watch the webinar and you buy through the webinar, the class, you actually get a couple bonuses. So that's just a little sneak peek in there, right? Okay, so here is a question. How can I get a good understanding? How will I get a good understanding of my target customer? Okay, so understanding your target customer, again, there's a whole module that goes in on that, but understanding your target customer is so important because your target customer, guys, is just not what the old marketers tell you. You pick up like an old school marketing book, or you take a class taught by like an old school marketer, and they're like, oh, well, your customer demographics are between the ages of, 25 and 44, and he lives in a urban environment, and, he makes $120,000 a year, and you get all of this like old school marketing jargon that means nothing, right? It just doesn't mean anything. It doesn't really apply to your business. What you really need to start understanding in terms of target customer is actually like building up the real profile so you can take that target customer and apply that target customer to your marketing strategy, right? So there's no point in understanding a target customer if you don't actually bother to take that information and apply it. So in fashion business, fundamentals, we actually go through kind of from soup to nuts, right? Understanding the target customer, but then you actually want to see that through, right? You actually want to make sure you see the target customer through to the development of all your branded assets, through to the development of your digital marketing strategy, of your direct marketing strategy. So that way you're not actually coming up with these bullshit type of, marketing things that don't actually apply to you, And I think what's a little bit deceiving here is people who have been playing around with Facebook ads, which I think is great to play around with, but just can be a horrible, horrible waste of your money if you haven't thought about it properly. The class actually helps you to start to understand, why strategy is so important. Because if you don't actually have a plan going into it, even as little as $5 a day is going to be a huge waste of your time, right? $5 a day is not going to actually get you anywhere, right? You need to have a real plan when it comes over that. So understanding your target customer, super important, but more than just coming up with a general type of philosophy on target customer, you've got to start to build and have an understanding of what is target customer, analysis, or understanding that what is that actually going to be good for? Meaning, like, where can you actually apply that information right away? And maybe if you're taking that information, you're applying it to your website rebrand, right? Maybe you're taking that information and you're applying it to, your next marketing activity, right? So something like a digital marketing campaign. Or maybe you're taking that customer information and you're actually applying it towards, if you're going to say yes to a certain market or a certain pop-up shop or not, right? So having customer profiles, super important, super good, but only insofar as you actually use it, right? So that's why the business fundamentals course, I think, is so ideal for brands who are really trying to understand, bootstrap for themselves, what the basic foundation is of what their business model is, right? What is the foundation of who you're going after? What is the foundation of your direct marketing strategy, of your digital marketing strategy, going wholesale, going e-commerce? And when you're going at it alone or when you're launching a business on your own, it can feel really isolating, right? It can kind of feel like there's no one on your side, right? Or there's no one who kind of understands the complexities of the retail landscape, right? And so that's why I think, this course, being able to have the group conversations, being able to learn from one another is going to be extremely valuable and extremely important. All right, guys. So thank you so much for joining me as we went over the Q&A session. I will be hosting some more of these in terms of understanding more about Fashion Profit Plan, understanding the different modules. I highly suggest heading over to fashionprofitplan.com if you just want to get an understanding more about the course and understand what I offer, a little bit more about my